Payal, for those who haven't come across you online, introduce yourself and tell our listeners why we're talking today.
My name is Payal Amin, and I work at a law firm, Frier Levitt, which is a national boutique law firm, and we focus exclusively on healthcare and life sciences. And we represent a lot of stakeholders across the industry, ranging from independent pharmacies to pharmacists across the nation. I work in a department that represents a lot of the pharmacy owners' interests against pharmacy benefit managers.
Dae, introduce yourself to our listeners.
My name is Dae Lee. I'm a pharmacist attorney from Frier Levitt. I work alongside with Payal. We're in the life sciences pharmacy/PBM department. My main focus is to help pharmacies against PBM audits, investigations, or any adversary actions taken by PBMs against independent pharmacies. I also involve myself into litigation side as well, given my background. And lastly, I co-chair alongside with one of the co-founding partner, John Levitt, on our plan sponsor practice group.
How many other pharmacist attorneys are there in the firm?
So in the firm total, at the moment, we have 3 pharmacist attorneys. I'm a practicing pharmacist attorney myself, and I find that this dual role helps to bring a lot of common interest to our client-lawyer relationship, especially being that a lot of our clients are pharmacies and pharmacy owners, and I think it helps a lot to bridge the gap when you're speaking with these clients as, you know, I'm one of you. So it kind of brings a lot of common interest and, you know, it helps to level the playing fields a lot.
What possessed you to go to pharmacy school and then to law school?
So for myself, I could say for myself here, I've always had, initially I've always, you know, kind of was tuned to the science side of things and helping patients and the patient interaction. Working at a retail pharmacy, I saw there's a lot of regulatory stuff and there's a lot of other stuff where I can expand myself in compliance and areas of law that overlapped in the pharmacy area that weren't necessarily addressed in a special area. So I felt, you know, the healthcare and the life sciences was a good background, and I always had an interest in kind of addressing a lot of that regulatory aspect of law that overlapped with the pharmacy.
Dae, how did you end up in law school after pharmacy?
Well, I believe it was during 5th year of Rutgers Pharmacy where I took pharmacy law class. And it intrigued me. And during my 6th year, where I focused on internships or externships, and I heavily, you know, focused on retail side, but I also was externing at an investment bank where I helped develop, I guess, potential pitches to investors for biopharma, and there were a lot of legalese involved with that. So it intrigued my interest, and then I decided to go to law school right away.
Good to have you both on the show. Were you in class with each other?
I think we were a year apart. Dae is a year ahead of me in school, but we did go to the same school. And so his interest started probably at the same time. The 5th year, same professor, I'm sure, that he had in pharmacy law class was mine as well. So
Must have been a good professor. People that work for me say, oh, geez, I'm never going to do what he did. Let's say you're out at a restaurant, which is hard to find these days with all the COVID stuff going on. And you're sitting there and someone comes up to you and says, wait, a pharmacist and attorney. And they'd say, why? Why is that needed? What are your stories that you would share with someone to give an example of why a pharmacist or a pharmacy is going to need an attorney?
Let me give you a punchline. The punchline is vertical integration of payers, PBM, and PBM-owned pharmacies. They're dominating the industry. Now, the payers that are affiliated with these pharmacies are also governing the payments that are paid out to the independent pharmacies. So they're dominating the market. They're driving out the independent pharmacies. And we hear many, many horror stories about the lack of care coming from the big chain pharmacies. and the middleman being the PBMs who are controlling all these payments. And they're literally driving out the independent pharmacies at the expense of the patients. So that's why you need an attorney who can advocate for independent pharmacies.
All right, Payal, what would an example be from you?
So it would be similar to Dae's, but the one component I would probably focus more on is these PBMs that have these audits that are left and right that are being thrown out to these pharmacies. And many of these independent pharmacies and pharmacist owners, a lot of them are not aware of all the laws that are there to protect them and various things that they can do to challenge these. Because again, a lot of these PBM practices, which include these audits that they're allowed to do under their provisions of the manual, there's many ways for these pharmacies to challenge them and know their rights to be able to handle these audits. And a lot of times, just being in the practice of pharmacy, being a clinician, that's not something that you're focused on. And there's many things that you're not aware of. But experienced attorneys like Dae and I, who work on these types of matters every day, can help a lot of these PBM abuses, and audits are one of the notable, notorious ways of having these PBMs come into the pharmacies and do a lot of detrimental things, such as, even eventually these audits leading up to termination. And it definitely leads to a lot of harm for these pharmacies, because that is where a lot of these independent pharmacies are going down that path. And a lot of these, the basis of a lot of these are due to PBM abuse practices that are happening.
For our listeners, and all the pharmacies know this, but I just want to describe it this way from listening to you two, is that we just went through an election here, and the U.S. government's supposed to have executive and judicial and then what Congress, I guess they would call it, right? There's a third word for that. And then you've got, a two-party system. And so what you're kind of describing in pharmacy is like those three branches are all run by the same person, and the Congress is the same person, and the FBI doing the audits is the same person. I mean, it's kind of like this vertical integration that Dae was talking about. It's like, that's got junk written all over it, and there's no way to win in that system, it seems.
That's why all the independent pharmacies and pharmacy owners have to fight. They have to continue to fight against these PBM abuse practices, especially the big ones. The top 3 PBMs are now controlling over 80% of the prescription claims submitted for the American citizens. And every day we hear horror stories about, an independent pharmacy that has been in business for over 50 or even 100 years that's going out of business because of PBMs reduced, or because of the reimbursement rate controlled by PBMs, and because of the post point of sale recruitment, whether it be an audit, whether it be a DIR fee, GER, or whatever effective rate that PBMs come up with, and then recoup at the end of the year. There is no bargaining power for independent pharmacies. And that's why it's extremely important for pharmacies to fight and continue to combat all these abuse practices. And that's why you need a real jealous advocate, for independent pharmacies. That's why you need an attorney who knows the ins and outs of the pharmacy law, who understands the practice of pharmacy, day-to-day operation. That's why you need an attorney who could fight for you, not just regular attorney down the street.
Okay, Dae, but here's a devil's advocate. You said it yourself, Dae, that these PBMs are so big. There's 3 main players. They're so big. And I, as a little pharmacy, am so small. So you got David versus Goliath. The other thing you've got is when the day is done, the pharmacist doesn't have a choice really to get away from these 3. So the pharmacist is also concerned about repercussions of taking legal action against a PBM and worried about retribution from the PBM to the little pharmacy. It's like they're so afraid to open your mouth. Do you see that from people?
I've heard of him, but there are certain protection provided by both federal and state law against retaliation by PBMs. So pharmacies, they are entitled to dispute claims under the provider manual, provider agreement drafted by PBMs, entered into with the independent pharmacies. I certainly understand that, David versus Goliath. So on that note, it is important that pharmacies come together and join together, start a grassroots effort, such as joining up with their state pharmacy association, trying to pass a bill and then trying to have the bill enacted into law, state laws, prohibiting certain actions taken by PBMs. For example, Tennessee is a great example of that grassroots effort. Recently, Tennessee passed a law prohibiting PBMs to recoup fees that were not readily disclosed at the point of sale. And certain states, including Texas, have good pharmacy PBM fair audit laws. All these count, in order for independent pharmacies to survive, besides treating their patients, besides helping their community, they need to come together.
How often are you guys acting as basically a defendant against a claim or something the PBM has aggressively done versus a pharmacy becoming the aggressor?
In terms of defense, I think you were asking if are we defending pharmacies ever?
Is it usually like an audit defense, or is it usually Joe from Joe's Pharmacy saying, I'm sick and tired of being treated this way and I'm going to make a aggressive pursuit of something in the documents?
Right. So there's usually like some sort of cause of action there. So, and it usually stems from an audit in our area, but there are various other reasons. We've seen pharmacies initiate action without any, PBMs doing anything directly, but it could be related to, like Dae had mentioned, like, DIR fees and GER fees and different things where they're experiencing MAC pricing, like different types of pricing issues that they experience with reimbursement rates that are being offered to these pharmacies based on the contracts that they've entered into. So it could even be pharmacies, and this happens more on our litigation side where pharmacies would want to initiate a litigation. And typically with PBMs, it's an arbitration process that we go through here. So, and that process, a lot of the times we are helping these pharmacies initiate something against the PBMs because they're in some way, shape, or form having some issue. There's some cause of action that's leading to it. But it's never, there is something usually specific tied to the basis of them wanting to pursue it. It doesn't always have to stem out of an audit, but in the case of an audit, it usually starts with a defense of an audit, and it can lead to further actions depending on how far the PBM goes.
All right. So a guy walks down the street and he says, do you want to sign this? And I say, what is it? And he says, this gives us authorization to kill your dog. And I say, boy, I guess I'll sign it. So I sign it. And then a month later, they come and kill my dog. And I say, this is terrible. You killed my dog. And they say, well, you signed this. All right. So with PBMs, are pharmacists just in the position of being dumb enough to sign a agreement that kills their dog? Or the PBMs have killed your dog and your cat? Or is there something wrong at the very start of the PBMs coming up with a contract to kill your dog? Are the PBMs just doing what they said they were going to do and we were dumb enough to sign it? Or is there something illegal about the contracts in the first place? Because it sounds like if you don't have a law against it, it sounds like the best we can do against the PBMs is to say, well, if you're going to do this, at least be gentle. If you're going to kill my dog, at least put it down gently. It seems like this has to start through some laws against that vertical integration. Is that where this has to go?
Yeah, in a way, because the vertical integration already happened, right?
Right.
For the top 3 PBM, the vertical integration is done. Now, that's why it is important for the pharmacies to start grassroots efforts by introducing bills that they could stop PBMs from killing their business.
Who cares about that?
Well, independent pharmacies must care about their business.
But do the people that are setting those laws up, let's say it's the legislature that's making these laws or voting on that. Let's say I run a shoe store or something, and I go to the legislature and I say, I don't like how, Zappos is putting me out of business. Well, I don't know if they care or not. Why does the legislature care about helping out the pharmacists?
Well, because helping out the pharmacies means helping out the local businesses, right? And helping out the local communities. And as I mentioned before, there are enough horror stories about lack of care coming from chain pharmacies. It's because their business model is to set up to run prescriptions, as many prescriptions as possible. Now, along with that, government claims are like Medicare, Medicaid, are paid by the government and is paid by the taxpayers, right? Now, out of the vertical integration, it is highly suspicious that the PBMs are applying. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying it is highly suspicious that PBMs are scrutinizing the affiliated or their own pharmacies with the same degree as they're scrutinizing the independent pharmacies.
We taxpayers are paying for these services, but if that vertical integration even owns those pharmacies, how much are they going to scrutinize what kind of care is out there? All of us know great pharmacists. In fact, I've never known a pharmacist that decided to go work at a chain because they were an inferior pharmacist. They've gone there, but they've got that structure going all the way up to that integration that's just pounding these numbers out, going all the way down even to the pharmacy.
Exactly.
Where else do you think that PBMs overstep their boundaries that a pharmacist can, at minimum, just say, no, I'm not doing that, and at maximum say, I'm getting my attorney involved because this ain't right? Where are pharmacists shaking when they shouldn't be shaking?
For example, one of the most recent trends that we've seen here, and we've just seen recently in the last few weeks, that there's been a growing trend among PBMs where PBMs are requesting like onerous member verification documents. Now, if a patient is going so far as visiting out of town and in a different state altogether, and the pharmacy is supposedly only licensed in that state. For example, let's say Florida, they're only licensed in Florida, and you have, many people, senior citizens have multiple homes, they visit from different areas. They've gone so far as now requesting documents and taking back money on claims, which were, paid pursuant to a facially valid prescription, and just recouping based on the fact that the member's address is out of state. And the pharmacy, according to our documents, is something as simple as you're only registered in the state of Florida. Why is this California patient filling here? Are you mailing prescriptions? So they make a lot of long-winded ties. There's no requirement to have anything like this, but they would, in that face, of a PBM abuse, simple things such as that lead to very detrimental consequences for these pharmacies.
They know that customer is their customer. You know what I mean? They know it's their client. And let's say you filled a $500 medicine for them, and it's like, all right, this person was in Florida, but you mailed it to Arizona, whatever, or vice versa. Someone from Arizona got it filled there. And it's like, those sons of a bitch, they know that would have been $500, whether that person was in Arizona or in Florida. They're just trying to not have to pay for it.
Right. And they're going after these, egregious ways of trying to recoup monies at the expense and burden of a pharmacy. Small independent pharmacies are not, staffed to be doing things like this. And these requirements aren't even, if we're going to go strictly by the provider manual, the contract, things like that are not necessarily put in there. You don't have to go as far as, checking all these documents, at the time, if it's a facially valid prescription. And a lot of these happen, unfortunately, to, like you had mentioned, like a $500 or $1,000 drugs where the reimbursement rates are high. So they target a lot of these types of prescriptions and, find a reason ultimately for things like this. And during audits, they'll, mark these claims as discrepant, and then they'll go so far as, taking the money back in advance of even having the full audit being, carried out to its termination here, or at least, given the opportunity for the pharmacy to fully address the audit. Without that even happening, they're still making recoupments in the early stages, and a lot of the laws that are out there, like state laws, it depends on where you're at, you can be afforded these protections. And it's very simple as, just knowing your rights and the laws and being able to leverage these to your benefit, being a pharmacy owner and simple things like that. So,
it used to be that it seemed to me that audits were more like, let's make sure that you're not stealing from us, and let's make sure that you're running a tight enough ship where things don't happen. But they're trying to make money off loopholes, right?
Yep, that's where these new trends we always see, and between our various pharmacy clients, we start noticing these new emerging trends. This PBM, it may just be specific to a PBM, and then eventually catches on amongst the three big players, or it's maybe focused. One PBM's always focused on this type of audit, and we have a lot of. I feel like the experience we get collectively through various pharmacies, it provides us with, a lot of ammo and how to tackle these issues and how to address these successfully, and in turn help the pharmacies, keep their business alive and ultimately be able to share the benefits with their greater community and provide the better patient care that we know that they're able to provide, and more tailored patient care that I see that these community pharmacies provide. So to add to what I was saying previously about the onerous member verification documents during these PBM audits, that, some of these are fairly simple tactics that these PBMs are using to leverage their power against pharmacies during audits and requesting onerous types of verification. Specifically, PBMs at this point are attempting to recoup amounts, the entire reimbursement that eventually, essentially was received already and it was already paid by these pharmacies successfully. And they'll go by just simply alleging that these members don't match the addresses on their records, although everything had checked out upon reimbursement. And it's highly concerning that now they're at the tail end that they're putting this additional burden on our pharmacies to demonstrate that the members did in fact receive their medication despite providing signature logs and things like that. They want to go the extra step because a lot of these audits are tied to audit fees, which PBMs do charge based on the percent of the recoupment. A lot of them are like a set percentage on the recoupment amount. So it can vary from, a few $1,000s to $100,000, depending on how high your, audit discrepancies are. So it's never evenly tied in. It's very, it's not a flat number. So a lot of this is based on the amount of dollars at subject or at stake here.
That's ridiculous because it almost seems to me like if someone's really cheating, well, then you kind of throw the book at them and then an audit's not even good enough. It almost seems like they should be dropped from the program, But when someone's not cheating and it's just they're finding stuff. So what you're saying is that for all the time they spent, they also get a fee on top of the audit recoupment.
Right. So on top of all these claims already being paid for and reimbursed, and they're also getting an additional, an incentive after the completion of the audit.
Oh, this is probably 20 years ago, and we had a orphanage a mile from the pharmacy, and we would do the medicine for them. I think we would add refills to the same prescription number because the nurses there kind of got in the habit of using the same prescription number maybe for a few months at a time. It was just easier on their charts or something like that. So I had a state inspector from Medicaid come in, and I said, hey, here's what we're doing. We're doing this. The doctor calls us every week. We're just adding prescriptions here. And the guy said, Matt, that's all right. Don't worry about it. So then, I should have known better than to just take his word. So then let's say 5 years later, we get a different inspector comes back. And they're saying, well, none of these prescriptions are legitimate. And so I drove to Lansing and I went to fight it at this, little hearing thing. And I said, how can you guys do this? You know that all of this was on the up and up. The doctor did this. You got affidavits from the nurses. You've got this. We've got a copy of the signature and all that. We've got a copy of this. And the guy from the state looked at me and he said, well, Mike, if we let you get away with this, or if we let this happen, how are we going to get our $20,000 back? And I'm like, you don't get your $20,000 back. The $20,000 went into their stomach. It medicated them. That's where that money went to. It's like you don't get it back. Well, there's the state, so they got it back.
Right. They found a way.
It's their patient. They're just looking for free money.
Yeah, so that's the whole big picture of it, what you kind of just stated right now. It's the same concept here with, these people have already received them. There was no patient harm in this. There was none of that, and they've received pursuant to validly, facially, pursuant prescriptions here. So,
and the thing about it is these companies, they probably have to show growth all the time. So first it was just finding crooks, and then maybe it was regular audits, and then it was trying to find all these areas where the patient got their medicine, and then it's trying to put fees on top of that. But then next year, it's not good enough for them just to do this. They've got to raise their profits up another, 10%. So they're going to find some other ways. Do you see that every year these seem to get more outrageous?
Yeah, so that's kind of what we've just seen recently. And that's why we're always monitoring these new trends that are coming out. And some of the things are more and more outrageous, and then the trend catches on across the board with different payers. And ultimately, all these trends, if you compile all the trends and the different things that are out there now, there's 20 different ways. Whereas, it was before was that they only looked at 3 different ways of, ensuring fraud, waste, abuse was not occurring. Now, a lot of these are under the guise of, we're doing a fraud, waste, abuse investigation. But, here's 20 different ways that it can lead to it. And, they're not always, what is outlined in the manuals. Some of these requirements are there, they're burdensome, and, they go the extra step to and that's where the law comes in. I feel a lot of times this is where we're able to, and pharmacies may not know these things, and just leverage a lot of that back to help pharmacies, especially when it comes to multiple audits. It could even be one audit. Inventory reconciliation's a big thing that leads to these terminations, and it could be small dollar amounts, in the few thousands, or it could be, in the millions. And those always essentially lead to terminations. And that's the ultimate thing that we want to more than just the audit, we want to prevent, the dollar amount that they're recouping. More than that, we're trying to prevent the ultimate termination, because that's when these pharmacies face even deeper troubles. It's either a period of like a year, 5 years, various ways, that they keep them out. And then the readmission process is, burdensome again to have to start all over again. So
it seems like they wouldn't want to kick somebody out unless they really knew that they were trying to be fraudulent, because it seems in their best interest to keep the pharmacies there just so they can screw them again the next year with their audit.
You would think so.
What's in it for them to kick somebody out?
So a lot of this is just how Dae had mentioned earlier, they're growing. They want to become the key players, and amongst each other, they're trying to, obtain the bigger share of the marketplace and obtain all that reimbursement, whether, they're able to do it through these audits, under this guise, they're able to recoup the money, but at a certain point, according to the manual, if we're going to apply it across the board to all pharmacy owners, in their interest, they want to just, take over, get their prescriptions sold to a local, PBM affiliated chain. So that way, that's where their business grows ultimately. Because a lot of these pharmacies end up, when they are terminated or they end up going out of business, not terminated, but if they eventually lead to, the pharmacy closing out of business, they're selling their business somewhere because you don't leave the prescriptions, just there. You have to sell the book of Rx's.
It's not like you're going to terminate a little pharmacy and everybody's going to die.
Yeah.
They're all going to take their prescriptions, and the odds are a good percentage of them is going to go to one of the chains.
The next town over, in the same town over, the closest local chain pharmacy that's in the area, in the vicinity, and that's what happens a lot of the time. So that, grows that vertical integration. It speaks to that again. So
I should have known that. I guess I did know that they want to terminate these smaller guys, and they can't just terminate them for no reason because that's bad press and there's a whole lot of problems there. I suppose they could.
Legal challenges.
Legal challenges.
Many states have any willing provider laws. A lot of states actually, a majority of states do have that, as a benefit, so, that's a good tool for pharmacies to be able to leverage. And we're able to use it a lot in the admissions process when they're not allowing admission just without a termination. And many times when they're terminating these pharmacies, that's a great tool to have on your side. And many states have good laws on that regard. So.
They have laws regarding willing provider.
Yeah, any willing provider,
But when you're terminated, it's like, well, it was their fault, and so we're going to terminate them now.
Well, yeah, that's where we try to dispute the underlying audit at that point. And again, there isn't any willing provider law, so long as they're willing to comply with XYZ, whatever the statute lists out, etc. We're able to. So
they can make them so onerous to say, well, you've got to have their birth certificate, and we need pictures of you at their 5-year-old birthday party.
So that's a lot of the things we do we help a lot with PBM network access as well as the post-network termination actions for pharmacies, because that requirement in itself, the network access component is very onerous as well. They require a lot of documentation to prove any common ownerships, things that little things, overlaps in employees. If you own multiple pharmacies, there's many things that can be overlooked that you may, as a pharmacy owner, may not realize, and many things lead to, we've worked on a lot of initial network access where they've just been denied, and not a lot of these PBMs do have any formal appeals processes, so we're able to usually leverage our contacts with, credentialing team or even the legal team there to try to work through and resolve rather than have the pharmacy wait a period of a year.
By that time, they've lost the customers.
From a period of a year to 5 years, depending on the actions of that PBM and the pharmacy. So that's a lot of lost revenue and, growth for the business. I
tell that to my son, who's not a pharmacist, but he's in the business.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, well, Dad, they can't do that. Just tell that PBM this or that. It's like the gag clause now that, let's say, I don't know all the details, but just for sake of argument, let's say that our governmental leaders took out the gag clause that was in there, but let's say it's still in the contracts. And so I can say, you can't throw me out of this contract because the gag clause are not legal anymore. And they can say, you might be right, but it's going to take us 5 years to fight this out. And by that time,
yep,
you've lost everybody.
Right.
Right.
So yeah, that's where we come in to try to do dispute resolutions process and, take it any step further, use the law there to try to leverage a lot of the stuff. But you need an advocate, where I think Dae was mentioning earlier, this is the part where we can assist in doing things like that. Because at the point of a termination, you're no longer in a contract with them. So there's many different pieces to consider at that point.
It seems to me, if I'm a PBM and I'm just trying to get rid of pharmacies, I might say, oh, Bob's pharmacy is the only pharmacy within 30 miles, so I'm going to let them be pretty loose and liberal on what they do and say and how they treat the contract. But Tim's Pharmacy, which is a mile away from one of our own PBM chain stores, I'd like to get them the hell out of here anyways. And so we're going to get them for just, 1 day supply being off or something. Do you see that kind of decisions? Does it seem to be like haphazard? That's one question. Two is, what are some things that seem not worthy of getting the pharmacy pulled out of the network that you've seen? How outrageous has a little infraction been, let's say?
They go as far as minor infractions of a few drugs on an audit that have been short. It doesn't matter the quantity. It's laid out in their manual there that this can form the basis. It doesn't have a quantity or a dollar amount that pertains to it. So they can be as egregious as they want, or they can be as lax. They've given pharmacy ample time, but they do tend to look at their history of audits or any other things that they have. So if you've been, subjected to a series of audits and they see many various discrepant results, that can be a component in it. Many times on your credentialing piece, when you're trying to get in network with the PBM, they ask, or even when you are a pharmacy during your re-credentialing process, because every pharmacy still, no matter what, even if you are contracted, you're obligated to update the PBM on any updates and changes. As well as you're required to fill out a re-credentialing application, and they would require a pharmacy there to answer the question of, have you been terminated from another pharmacy? So it can be, any basis, whether it's laid out in their manual, they can take, okay, you were terminated by XYZ PBM and we're ABC PBM. What was the basis for that? And so then they go after, they want to know everything about the pharmacy. So they'll take it the next step to kind of focus into it. So you think, oh, well, one doesn't talk to the other. But as a part of your re-credentialing application, you are, obligated to provide these answers truthfully. And if they ever, find out or things like that. So that's the steps that they take to kind of try to get the full picture. And that's why it's always important, no matter how small your infraction is, you want to resolve that immediately, provide an explanation, provide some sort of corrective actions, things like that, which we're able to help formulate to try to address that underlying reason or the underlying discrepancy, or whether it should even be a discrepancy to begin with. That's one of the things. So it's not really like a rhyme or reason that I can say that they, follow a pattern. It can be I've known pharmacy owners, and maybe he's about like a 10-year pharmacy owner, never been subjected to an audit. And I'm sure various types of claims ranging from, thousands of dollars of claims and, regular, or atorvastatins and your chronic medications, like less inexpensive medications, and never been subjected to that. So, but once that can of worm kind of opens, or once they see a response on your credentialing or re-credentialing application, that's where, they try to find something.
Now that you've given me new ideas to think the worst of a PBM, I'm going to think the worst of them now, as if I could think any worse of them. Knowing that they probably want to kick people out of the network. And I can't believe that's always the case, but let's just say it was. Let's say that they're intent on kicking people out. Why did they change that when they see an attorney coming?
Well, I think a lot of that is that pharmacies aren't advocating for themselves fully if they're representing themselves. And, and I've seen pharmacies come having done their own appeals, and then at the last stages, where they're ultimately at the brink of being kicked out, they want to save themselves, and they're, wanting to, retain us and to try to move forward. I think a lot of that has to be because of the fact that you're having legal to legal conversations and discussions and leveraging what is contractually valid and what's okay to do. And with the next process, exhausting all of the dispute resolutions process, the appeals process, which a lot of pharmacies are not aware of. And I think they know, ultimately if it goes down to litigation, the costs are there. I mean, they have a lot of money. They're a big player in this industry. These little pharmacies may not, but there's many pharmacies who are able to sustain and withhold those types of costs. They have that in them because they know they're able to pursue something. And if they do see that there is an angle, there is some sort of they're willing to negotiate. If there is something where the law is on their side, or, an explanation or something of that sort has provided enough reason for them to want to, engage in discussions.
What you're saying is they're not necessarily afraid of you because you're an attorney, but you actually bring more potential answers and avenues that a pharmacist may not be thinking of.
Right. So to advocate for themselves a little better here. And many times it's the ultimate, the long haul of the cost. So when they know that there's things and avenues that they can resolve without going to that, to that extent of litigation, when there's chances that we can resolve this, many times some PBMs are open and receptive to negotiating in advance of it going down that way, that pathway, because they'll give opportunities to provide supplemental documentation and things like that where you may not have gotten that chance. I mean, you may have. Again, it's not to say, if a pharmacy couldn't have advocated and gotten that opportunity, but there's many chances that we're able to, leverage another opportunity and provide supplemental corrective things that, we have seen that, PBMs are receptive to and in wanting to work with the pharmacy. At a time, they are, it's not to say that, that they're not willing to work. There's many times that we've seen that, but that's where we're able to help the pharmacies avoid the costly litigation, or sometimes that does need to become, and we do many times have to escalate to litigation because that's just the way that it went in the course of matter of things, but that's a lot of where it goes, yeah.
A lot of pharmacists know, or they can get their hands on ways to maybe avoid an audit. And pharmacists by no means are perfect, but I don't want to go there. I want to go to two places with you. One is, what's a stupid thing a pharmacist could do or say to the auditor or to the PBM after an audit? That's number one. Number two is, what's something a pharmacist can say that's a real zinger for the auditor and they wouldn't get in trouble really for saying it? There might not be an answer there, but I know that all of us pharmacists and all the listeners right now, if they're like me, they're like saying, what's something I could do to really stop them in their tracks?
Just to go backwards, I guess, to answer that question, I don't know if there's necessarily one specific thing that a pharmacy could do at the moment, to stop an auditor in their tracks. Because again, they have to, I feel they do consult a lot with their auditing team, as well as, when, there's legal involved, with their legal, but I think a lot of the laws, the auditors are not, they're generally just auditors. And some states require the auditors to be, and audits to be conducted, by a pharmacist, a licensed pharmacist, depending on that. So things, just knowing your rights as a pharmacy could help, especially in the state that you're in. And it's usually state specific for wherever your pharmacy is.
Do you think this one will work? Let me try this one out on you. It would go something like this. The auditor asks you a question, and I would say to them, do you know who I am?
I don't. I do not know if that would work again.
That wouldn't
no,
work?
I'm not too sure on there. So that part, unless they think they're confident.
Do you know who I am? You don't recommend that one?
No, I don't know. I don't know how well that would work. So
now back to the first question. What's a really stupid thing that a pharmacist could do? Maybe not right with the auditor, but right in the early parts of that audit.
Yeah, maybe just without fully engaging in a root cause analysis, telling something that the pharmacy has done and it wasn't a full picture of it, something that egregious, the pharmacy did XYZ. I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head where a pharmacy would own up to like, oh yeah, we switched the drug without calling the doctor, and we did something simple like that. But, without providing any background explanation to the context to that. Yes, I admit that I did do that and nothing else, yes, I was wrong, but we won't do it again in the future. Something like that.
It was a hurricane warning that day and they evacuated this and the doctor wasn't available and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So doing a lot of root cause analysis before you provide your response is something that we would want to do. So just, admitting you did something just because they said, look, you did this when you look at your prescription. Yes, I did do this. But did you figure out why you did this? Did you have a standing order or something of that sort that would give you the power to do that? Or is it in your professional judgment that you're able to, on an emergency over the weekend, do something where, you're able to give an emergency day supply and you had written a prescription for like a few days to continue something. And yeah, that's just an example. I don't know if that's happened, but something like that you would not essentially want to do without thinking about it and identifying your root cause.
Payal, what's your typical day in terms of, are you on the phone with pharmacists? Are you at their pharmacies? Are you...
So it depends on the matters that we're currently working on, and you have a whole host of clients, and many times the issue may have been resolved with one client, but they kind of remain your client, and 2 months down the line, another PBM pursues an audit with them, or they have a different issue with a termination or something of the sort. And a lot of times we do a lot of various matters. It could be a regulatory matter, which will escalate, or cross-reference to our regulatory side. So, or if it's a litigation thing where they're experiencing different issues, we try to issue spot and provide them the proper guidance on that. So, so it could be a client that's a dormant client. A lot of phone calls happen. So depending on the matter, we have phone calls with pharmacies scheduled, or various communication through email. So those are Zoom calls. A lot of that, since we represent all states throughout the United States. So all our clients, whether it's West Coast, we accommodate them, or East Coast on where we're at. Various phone calls and emails and reviewing documentation pertaining to it and coming up with strategies and kind of like a game plan with them as to how we're going to resolve this issue, how we're going to tackle it, working within deadlines, strict deadlines, extensions, various things with those responses that we need to gather, and anything additional that we may see, on top of just doing the minimum. Here's something we recommend doing additionally to, put the favor on your side at least,
And then the pharmacies can decide whether they just want an answer, or they want to learn a little bit or change something or whatever. You can walk through that with them.
Exactly. So there's many times that, once we've done a root cause analysis, we've identified, okay, your issue might be here in your policies and procedures. So many times we will go back and, enhance. They may already have one or they may not. So we go down and, a lot of these PBMs may want to see that these pharmacies have valid procedures and policies in place. So ultimately addressing the underlying basis, if you have a formal protocol in place and showing that the pharmacy takes its obligations under the contract and PBM manual seriously, and that you adhere to these steps, doing things like that for pharmacies definitely helps. And it's up to the pharmacy. Ultimately, we recommend certain steps, and what they want to do and how much they want to improve any chances of, the more things we are able to do, sometimes that gives them a better chance of fighting whatever it is that we're trying to fight. So, yeah.
Payal, for our listeners that may not know, we talked to your other half. We're talking with the better half right now, but we talked to your other half, Mac, some shows ago. Where am I going to find you guys 10 years from now if I popped into your town? Are you guys going to be at the same place, Mac at the store and you at the law firm, or what do you think?
That's the plan. Yeah. So we want to keep him as a pharmacy owner as well. We want to keep him in business, keep him serving the community. He enjoys a lot of what he does. But again, PBMs are at the heart of all of the issues that have been affecting these independent pharmacy owners. So a lot of the work I do kind of ties into people like him. So it's like a big picture, both of us being pharmacists, but, doing different avenues of pharmacy. He works in the retail community and his own being a business owner as well. So I see a lot of the challenges he faces and then find the common ground, with my clients as well. And as well as the fact that I practice and I see some of these things firsthand and seeing what he experiences. So it helps to bring a lot to the table.
So Payal, I don't know if you know this, but Mac told me that if ever I'm out there, I just get to stop by and you guys are going to feed me. What are you going to make for me? What's a special dish that you'd make?
I barely cook. and then I barely cook Indian food. So if I do, it's anything really but Indian food.
I went to a restaurant in town. I think it was Indian food. I'm not sure, but it was the best word I could think of it. It was very perfumey, like very
fragrant.
Fragrant. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, there's a lot of spices, a lot of things going. So if you have like a palate where you're able to, you definitely can identify flavors. I don't know if I'm that great at it. So, I'll notice things, and after a while I'll notice, I'm like, oh, there's too much of this in it, but I'm not really, Mac's not that way, and neither am I. We both aren't really picky except the spices. My spice level is like a 1, 0 almost. I'm not really into the spices. Many Indian people are. I'm not. He can probably tolerate a little more, but not me. I'm just, pretty bland. Not bland. I definitely need flavor, but not the spice, not the heat.
Well, first of all, I'm not gonna let Mac take care of our meal planning, because when we were on the interview together, he hadn't done his morning prayers yet. And so he wasn't eating until like 9 at night. So
he's done that on days, and I've tried to change it.
I ain't doing that with him. And then you and I, what we'll do is we'll pick up some McDonald's.
Or we can pick up some Indian takeout, so that way you can enjoy it.
Do you think I'd have to order it, though? Would you know what you were doing at least?
Yeah. No, yeah. That I do. I can probably do it. I just have no interest in cooking Indian food.
You could at least order it.
Yeah, I could pick it up, and I could pick it up like in the sense I could pick takeout, or I can learn the dishes, and I know how to do a few staples, but I'm just not into Indian food enough to like learn. I have certain dishes I like that are not like typical, like authentic meals, but maybe like a paneer makhni. I could do that.
Yeah, I don't even know what that was. So
so it's like a tofu with like a curry sauce, like an orangey curry sauce, and has a lot of flavor packed into it. So it's like butter. So the makhni means like it's a butter gravy. It's like a gravy with tofu. I mean, you can make a chicken makhni as well. I'm a vegetarian, so yeah, that could be the substitute. So the paneer is like a cheese cube, like a tofu like block.
Okay, that sounds good.
And then you just have some naan, which is bread, and you're usually not making that. That's usually like store-bought or something.
So we've got some good friends from Bangladesh. Do we get to eat the Indian food with our hands like they do?
Yeah, so that would be eaten with a piece of the bread, and you would just take...
Oh, the bread's like the scoop
thing. Yeah, you scoop it, and then you dip it in the gravy, and you'd have your bites and eat it that way.
Yeah.
The rice, if you had rice with that, you can just mix the gravy. So the first part, you would just eat it with the bread, and then when you had a leftover gravy, you would just dump your gravy into the rice, or vice versa, throw your rice into that bowl and eat the gravy like coated with the rice here.
What of yours and Mac's ancestors came to the U.S.? How far back do you go?
So my mom came here first when she was not married, and she came here
from India.
Yeah, from India. Yeah, my mom.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, just and his parents too. I think it was his dad might have came in like 1980. Well, he was born here, so I guess.
Did all the parents come from India?
All of our parents were born there and raised there, and they came here around the same in the 80s. My mom was here in the early-ish 80s. His dad maybe came like mid to later 80s, like a couple of years difference. Not too big of a difference, but yeah.
Somewhere something got lost, because your mom must have fed you Indian cuisine.
That's part of the reason I grew up on it. It was like every day in elementary school. Now I don't want it, because I'm like, oh, it was a Monday to Friday thing. And I was like, I'm sick of this. I'm tired of Indian food. Mac loves it, but even now that I've started, when I do cook, because I don't cook like Indian food as much, now when he's at his mom's house, like she's like, oh, well, you like this and we're eating dinner. She goes, oh, but you used to like this. You used to. And I see the face, like she's like disappointed in him that he doesn't like Indian. And he knows his wife, me, I do not really prefer Indian food. So that influence, he's like, well, he's never known these dishes before his mom cooking for him. So yeah, that's how that's happened. I've branched out. My sister's like completely no Indian food. I will eat it, but my sister's very like anti.
Just sick of it.
Yeah, just sick. It's like you've grown up. It's like you've known too much. Yeah. It's like you overdid it when you grew up, and I'm like, I don't want it. I don't have an interest in that. It's like more Italian, Mexican, like Chinese, like like all that Oriental food, all that stuff is.
We'll hit the Indian place at least.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that.
And then Matt can say his prayers at 11 p.m. and can join us later.
11:59. It's like, I made it.
Well, Payal, great having you on the show. Tell Mac hello.
I will definitely let him know. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.